G'day everyone, welcome to Lubrication Experts. I'm here today with Shane Scriven of SAS Asset Management. As the name implies, is an asset management specialist, and I put a bit of a call out for questions. It's a bit of an Ask Me Anything session, so went onto the YouTube channel and a couple of WhatsApp groups and sort of collated all the questions. They're not really kind of organized by theme or anything like that, so we're just going to go through these questions, and Shane's going to give his viewpoint. I'll put in my 2 cents where I have relevant experience to share. So, Shane, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey mate, I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to this. It's taken us a couple of months to sort of get it together. No, it's going to be fun. And the questions that your audience has put through, I think there's like a lot of like really good things in there, and it's good to see like where everyone's head is like at in the management / lubrication space. So I'm really excited. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. This sounds really good. So I'm gonna start with the first one, which I think is an interesting question of, do you recommend putting lubricants into your CMMS? So I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, very tactical question straight off the bat. So I'm going to lose now. Look, I as an asset manager, yes. But as a practical lubrication person, no. Reason being is like I've worked predominantly with SAP, that's the CMMS, and to get like a lube route that's like flexible and usable in SAP, like you need to do a lot of work in SAP to produce like task lists and things. It's really hard, but you can just like do that really easy in Excel. Like in other sort of things, like even like a web-based thing, you can just make it much simpler and easier to use. So my recommendation is if you're going to do it in a CMMS, you've got to do it like 99% to 100% properly. But if you're time poor and you're diminishing returns type of thing, if you can't get there, I recommend not bothering and just getting on with the lubrication.
Yeah. I think that the challenge for a lot of the people that I see as well is that a lot of the lubrication routes are sort of done a little bit differently to the rest of the maintenance tasks. So, a lot of maintenance tasks are, okay, I've got a job for today. It is to go out to a specific, let's call it a gearbox, right? Whatever asset it is, and perform a maintenance task. And then I'll go back, get some tools for the next job, and I can close out that job in the CMMS, versus a lube route, which is often, I'm going to go and check on, 25 different assets, right? And then maybe I don't get to one of those tasks because, the asset is inaccessible, or maybe it's been taken out of service or something like that. So then the question is, does that mean that my entire route can't be closed? And so there's always that tension, right? Of how do you manage the practicality of the CMMS?
Yeah. And like an organization, not just the maintenance team, if you take a step back and say, I'm no longer a maintenance person, I'm now the chief risk officer, right? They use a CMMS more for assurance purposes. So what we actually really need is just a record that stuff was done, and it was done on time, the right dosage rate and all these things. Like that's what's actually important. Let's not get carried away with things. It's like the asset wants you to get it lubricated, so go do it. The business wants you to lubricate it, but they equally just want you to record that it was done. And that's what is actually important. So that's sort of my sort of coach.
Yeah, that's a good philosophy, I think, to kind of take to it. All right, let's go. Question number 2, which is fundamental, I guess, to asset management, which is, what is the difference between reliability and asset management?
Yeah. Okay. Good question. It's like, I think on another podcast, Actionaid's Reliability It Matters podcast, he asked me sort of like a similar. So like reliability is like a piece of the asset management puzzle. And I like to use the asset management puzzle as a phrase because it is a puzzle. Quite often you don't know what it looks like until it sort of comes together. But it's one piece, and really reliability engineering is there to assure that capability of the asset, that level of service of the asset. It's providing its set function for the set period of time. Asset management then takes a step back and says, well, as an organization, what does the organization need to do to support that asset? So does it need to ensure that capital planning practices are appropriate? Does it need to ensure that the environmental management aspects of the asset are in place? Spare parts, all these things, training, skills, workforce management. These are all things that need to be done to support the asset and the asset management function more holistically. So they are very different. Reliability engineering is an essential piece of the asset management puzzle, but it's certainly not everything. And asset management is a very broad, very vast skill set and function within organizations. So long story short, reliability engineer is a small aspect of the asset management system.
Yeah, that's a really awesome answer. So, and by the way, shout out to Akshay as well on his podcast, who's just doing some really, really good work. I'll put a link in the description below or something like that. So if people haven't come across it yet, strongly encourage you to go across, and he's doing some really good work.
Absolutely.
All right, question 3. So this, I think, is coming from the perspective of someone who's working for presumably a lubricant sales organization or a lubricant provider, right? And they're asking, okay, asset management calls for a holistic approach to reliability. And this kind of relates back to your previous answer, talking about we need everyone to be aligned. So that's management, procurement, projects, engineering, ops, maintenance. And then what their question is, we can't even get maintenance to care about lubrication. So why should we expect that fundamentally anyone else would actually care about lubrication?
Wow. I think that person's got a wonderful operational context that I'd love to understand. Like what's going on in that organization. Break it down, right? So maintenance people don't care about lubrication. Why would we expect anyone else would care? Well, look, I put it this way. I think your chief financial officer would care indirectly about lubrication because they don't want to see the assets go down and, money stop coming in the door. So whilst they don't necessarily care about the lubrication technician going out and doing some wonderful work and staying clean and all these great things, they actually indirectly do care. So I don't think it's sort of fair that no one else cares. It's just they care from their perspective. And that's like at the heart of asset management, that like we talk about different lenses within asset management and the lens you wear. Right. And I mentioned, the chief risk officer before. They've got a very different lens and perspective on maintenance tasks or just the organization in general than, your maintenance planner or your fitter and turner. So these are the various different lenses. What's key in asset management, though, is aligning those lenses and saying, okay, well, we're here as a team. Let's do the right things within our sort of sphere, and hopefully they all sort of complement each other, and we sort of navigate our path, and then that's what our asset management looks like. So, sort of coming back to that question again, I'd love to know their context and the stories I'm sure that they have. But look, if you can't get maintenance to care about lubrication, that there is really a training and awareness thing, and perhaps the maintenance skills, like the core ones, are not necessarily there. That's pretty important. Why would we expect anyone else to sort of care? That's probably more a question for the person who's asked this. And it's like, why do they not care? Is there not an asset management or at least a maintenance strategy in place that's communicated throughout the organization? And I think a lot of these things can be solved by looking internally to ourselves and also our core team. And that may be a hard pill to swallow sometimes for some people and teams, but quite often we are at least contributing to the cause.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the question probably comes from let's say a wider frustration that a lot of the
Yeah.
oil suppliers have, which is that it feels like a race to the bottom in terms of cost dollars per liter, right? Versus
Mm.
there aren't too many places.
Mm.
Obviously, it's geographical and it's by industry as well, but there are often a lot of places which don't have that holistic view of reliability or that
Yeah.
understanding of how lubricants relates to reliability outcomes. So
Yeah.
I appreciate
And
the
look,
frustration, but you're right. I think,
yeah,
it maybe speaks to wider issues.
and I think, and I've never seen this. I'd be sort of interested in your perspective, mate, on this. But like you said it there, it's like a race to the bottom with respect to cost. But do our lubricant providers do enough work? Because and I'll preface this and say, in asset management, we talk about the three-sided triangle, saying cost, risk, and performance. And as asset managers, it's our job to strike the right balance of those three for our organization, depending on its context. And so, when we say it's a race to the bottom with cost, is there enough work being done in the industry to say, well, performance and risk aspects of lubricants is XYZ. So if you pay more, you're going to get a better performance or lower risk. Like, is there enough work being done there to sort of send that message? I don't know.
Yeah, so I've got an axe to grind on this one.
It grinds a lot.
I've spoken about this a couple of times that my take on it is that the industry has done itself a disservice by the way that they've gone to market. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of the business that the major lubricant providers are predominantly fuel companies. So
Yeah.
their fundamental skills are selling a commodity product, and you get a lot of cross-pollination between the fuels and the lubricant sales teams. And so that sort of selling behavior underpins the majority of the volume that goes through the industry. And it's very difficult to then pivot to a kind of value-based approach, right? Or a reliability-based approach when most of what you do is selling dollars per liter. And that's a very, very difficult mindset. We've almost coached customers into, when they receive a tender from a fuel or I should say oil company, then it should be a race to the bottom. When of course, people who have maybe a better understanding of it would know that fuels and lubricants are very, very different products, right?
Yeah, and that reminds me of when I was back at the sugar refinery. Our lubricant contract had obviously a cost $1 per liter, the various lubricants we used, but we also put a measure of performance on them with respect to particulate matter and water in the lubricants as well. So, like, as a customer, we were like saying, well, we're happy to pay more if you agree to these service levels of your product, and if that doesn't meet those service levels, then you'll be taking it back and replacing it free of charge. And like, that's maybe another way that customers can start to sort of influence those suppliers and asking for guarantees in the risk and performance aspect.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too. All right. Next question. So I've got two questions back to back about training here. The first
cool.
one is more lubricants related. So the first question is, this is interesting. So do you personally see any value in MLA training and certification? And I'll broaden the question to MLA, MLT, MLE, CLS,
Yes.
and OMA. Oh, and LLA, I guess, as well. I forgot about that.
Right? So I'm fortunate. I've got MLT, MLA, and MLE as well. Just so personally, so I'm going to answer this on a personal level. I'm going to answer this then on an organizational asset management level, and I'm interested to see what you think, mate, on this one. So yes, is my answer. I do see value from a personal perspective, because doing not so much the training, but the learning
Yep.
really helped me in my career, and understanding or getting a grasp of oil analysis and using that is in condition monitoring. It really helped me, and it's set me up. And I've used that. I suppose the learnings, I couldn't recite any of it to you, but I've used the learnings of MLA training many, many, many times in my career. So I'm a strong believer in that from a personal perspective, and just a purely learning and development from a personal aspect. Yes. From an organizational perspective, I do see value in it as a competency. And again, it's coming back to assure that the people in your organization are the right people to do the job. And whether or not it's like they need to be MLA or there's some other certification out there, take that out of the picture. But just having a standard, right, and measuring your people against that standard is a really important thing for an organization, probably larger organizations, to say, yeah, we're actually not wearing a lot of risk in the competency aspect of our people. The risk exposure there is quite low, or it just gives them something to work with. So I do see value in it, and I'm hoping that's swayed the listener there to maybe stump up and get amongst it. But I'm keen to hear what you think.
Yeah. So I do see where the question is coming from, because I think, in certain parts of the world, the certification training and sitting the exam, I think, is quite an expensive exercise. And so I think that's where the question comes is, well, if I'm going to be shelling out all this money, is it going to be worth my while from maybe, I don't know who specifically asked the question, but maybe from a career standpoint, or, what am I going to learn from it? Now, do I see value in it? Yeah, I do. I think there are pockets of the industry which could really use that kind of training. I do think it is probably more valuable to, let's call it, lubrication professionals, as opposed to maintenance and reliability teams, in the sense that the MLA and MLT training, by their very nature, have to be quite general. They've got to be quite broad. So they have to deal with the lubrication of basically every asset, right? Because they can't sort of drill down and be specific. And so that's actually why in my business, the training packages I'm putting together are very narrow. So I'm doing application specific stuff, like, lubrication of just specifically open gears, or, just because there are professionals out there who that's all they deal with. They just deal with open gear sets. They don't need to know, how an engine works or anything like that, right? And I should just say, like, there is also plenty of training providers who cover that sort of MLA, MLT, STLE, CLS kind of training really, really well. So that's kind of, I think, maybe where I see the split in value. If you're a lubricants professional, if you're in the condition monitoring world, if you're just generally in asset management, you have sort of more broad scope, then for me, that's where MLA, MLT, MLE training sort of really holds its own. And then if you're kind of have a bit more of a narrow focus, then maybe you're looking for something a bit more specific. That's
that's good. That's a good answer. Yeah, cool.
All right. Now for a question that is a bit more in the asset management and maintenance and reliability kind of training world.
I love this question.
This one was interesting when it came through. So the question is, there's so many certificates out there, and they listed the CAMA, so Certified Asset Management Associate, right? And then CMRP, which is Certified Maintenance and Reliability Professional, CRL, CAM, CFAM, CAAM, CSAM, CPAM. And their specific question was, doesn't this make the industry look like a joke? Now, I'm going to soften the question a little bit. I get the confusion, right? There are so many different certifications offered by so many organizations.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll get on my soapbox a little bit here for a second.
Please do.
I also do see the frustration coming from other quarters in so much as, right, a lot of these training, they're absolutely valuable, right? But you can do, a 5-day course or whatever and then pass the exam and you're certified.
Yeah.
My wife just finished her PhD, which was like,
Mm.
a 4-year grind, having
Yeah.
to defend all your arguments and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And I think it's sort of, when people put these qualifications on the same level, right?
Mm.
They're putting all the letters after their name and stuff. I see, I can see where people think that it starts to take the mickey a little bit. However, I'd like to get your view on it because I don't hold any of these certifications.
I hold a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and I'd just be
Uh,
curious, like, what did you get out of the process? And
yeah.
do you, how much differentiation is there between all of these?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I hold a lot of them.
Yep.
There's one missing, the CRE, Certified Reliability Engineer.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, that's to me, that's like one of the top level ones. I
yeah,
do
right.
not have that one, and I wish to get that, but Akshay does. So
Oh, there
if
you go.
you're tuning into Akshay podcast, get amongst it. He knows what he's talking about. He's not just a guy with a microphone. So
Sure.
um, so walking through these, and you might have to put them on the screen here,
Yep.
mate. But you've got the CAMA, which is Certified Asset Management Assessor, I think it is, and that's delivered by World Partners in Asset Management, and it's really a framework to say that that person has enough knowledge of the ISO 55,000 suite of standards to do a maturity assessment against that. That's really all that one is. And I think you raised a really good point there, mate, about which ones are like, the PhD style. And I say that with absolute respect because none of these are. But like, it's more like recognition of ongoing learning in a career, right? That's sort of that bucket there. And then there's the ones where, you sit an exam, you need to get 75% pass rate. If you know 50%, you can probably just make your way through the last 25%. So if you do half and multi-choice, you can, the odds start to tip in your favor. So the CAMA one is that exam. You can just sort of schedule that and go and do that. But you've got to do the reading. You've got to know a little bit about that. So it's a good one. Yeah, I've got that one. The CMRP is much the same. It's in that same basket. The Certified Maintenance and Reliability Practitioner, done by the Society of Maintenance and Reliability Professionals in the US. That's a good one. I think I don't have that one, but the Akshay does. He keeps coming up.
Yeah, yeah.
That's an okay one. But again, you can sort of sit down and sort of do a reading for a couple of days and just go in and pass that exam. There's no hurdles or anything like that. The CRLs, Certified Reliability Leader, I think that's distributed by reliabilityweb.com. So, I mean, with respect to Terence over there, that's a website, right? Giving away a certification if you do something. So there's some good topics in there. But again, it's one of those ones where you could just sort of get through an exam and get it done. The CAM, I'm not across the CAM. That may be a typo, or I may just not know what I'm talking about, but I'll move past that one. I'm not too sure what CAM is. But then the next four here, which are, I'll put them in order of how they're meant to be. So there's the CAAM, and these are all delivered by the Asset Management Council of Australia. So the CAAM is Certified Associate of Asset Management, I think. That's like an entry level, but it's recognition of prior knowledge and experience. So if you can demonstrate in a series of topics that you have experience in that topic. You can, say yes, and you can give an explanation of that experience. And then someone's got to like do the online equivalent of a stat deck to say, yep, I know that person and they did that. Right. So it's like real recognition of who you are and what you've done in your career. So that's CAAA.
That's interesting. So that sounds a little bit more like our process for becoming a certified professional engineer through like Engineers Australia, right? Very similar. You
So
show evidence of work experience and then have someone,
yes,
who you've worked with sign off on that.
exactly. And there is a dovetail when they get up into a higher level. So you're absolutely right. So the next one is CPAM, so Certified Professional Asset Management, maybe. So that's just like the next level up, and the suite of, I suppose, subject areas doesn't change. You just need to know more of them. Okay, and then there's CSAM, and I have the CSAM one. But you don't sort of say, well, I'm CAAM, I'm CPAM, I'm CSAM, right? Once you get CSAM, you drop the others.
Yeah, right.
And so you're out there. And now when you're at CSAM or CSAM, you can then dovetail into the certified practicing engineer. What you need to do is you still need to go through the Engineers Australia process, but you skip a lot of the start piece of that. So I'm sort of at that point, and I'm considering, do I do my CPN in asset management or not? So that's what that is. And then the CFAM or CFAM is like certified fellow, and that it's like the top. You need to know all the subjects. So it's sort of like there's two categories in here. They're not all equal, but they're all sort of very different. It doesn't make the industry. I don't think it makes the industry look like a joke. It's not my type of joke, but there is a lot out there, and there's no mention anywhere that you have to have all of them. It's where is your career going?
Yeah.
What do you need in your career? And if this person is having trouble figuring out which they need to do, they probably need to do like a career planning session to figure out what's important and what isn't.
Interesting. That's not an outcome that I expected out of that question, was career advice, but that's fantastic. That's really good. All right.
Yeah.
The next question is a joke because it was, do you have any good crypto recommendations? And just this question came to us before everything just got absolutely crushed. So
yeah,
I'm glad we didn't make any recommendations before that. And obviously,
I'm not a crypto person. I don't even gamble. But look, if you want my recommendation, it would be to look at the uncertainty. Don't necessarily look at the price.
there we go.
Right? There you go. So
there we go.
Joke on you.
Maybe there is a way we could sort of dovetail this in. I mean, just out of curiosity, have you seen any interesting implementations of blockchain in the asset management space?
Yeah, I've not seen it. However, a good friend of mine, Belinda Hodgkinson, talks to me a lot about blockchain. I don't know a lot about it, but I do think there really is a good place for blockchain in asset management when it comes to like, is this a genuine part? In our industry, like there's a lot of talk about counterfeit bearings, right? SKF are always talking about counterfeit bearings, right? Is this a good part, or what's the blockchain link to get the asset data? Asset managers are always complaining that the asset data is not there from capital. Well, can we put that into like a blockchainy thing? I'm showing my naivety come ignorance there, but I think there is room for it there.
Yeah. Yeah, that implementation of being able to sort out the fakes from the genuine articles, that is obviously a huge problem. And I think that would be a hugely valuable step forward in being able to eradicate some of these fakes. Because the other thing is, some of these fakes are getting really good, almost indistinguishable from the real thing. Obviously, then you put it in use and it fails substantially earlier. But on like cosmetically, it's very, very difficult to tell the difference. So any kind of new technologies that can be brought to bear on verification is just that'd be a huge step forward.
Yeah. So good question in the end.
Yeah. All right. So this one maybe a little bit of a related question to one of our earlier ones. So this question was, how do you convince people of the value of lubrication when so few people understand it?
Yeah. I think that person's answered their own question. It's like, you got to make them understand it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I do appreciate where this person is coming from. Yeah, there is a complete misunderstanding in many industries about the value of lubricants, and there can, and I've seen it many times, be a big lack of understanding in the trades that really should know about lubrication, right? And like the simple, the fitter and turner, that person that is touching, these things, that fantastic. They know. Well, I've seen examples where they know a lot about WD-40, right, but not about active grease.
Yep.
So there's a bit about that. So how I've gotten around that previously is taking them almost through like a lubrication 101 and just stripping it right back to the core, functions of a lubricant, right? It's to reduce friction, prevent corrosion. There's like 5 or 6 of them, whatever they are, and just discussing those things, and then like talking about, well, what does that mean to our organization, and relating it to dollars, and downtime and safety. But I think in answer to this person's question is, you need to develop that understanding at a very, very basic level, and don't even start talking about sampling and particle size and PQ index and TANs and all that wonderful stuff that we love, because it sounds like it'll be lost on a lot of people, and you'll lose the battle. So keep it simple is my advice there.
Yeah, that's really good advice, and it's interesting because even when you take a step up, into the sort of the reliability engineer world, I mean, one of the
Mm.
structural issues that I guess I've always found in my work is that almost everyone that I deal with are mechanical engineers, right?
Yep.
So even myself, I've got a mechanical engineering background,
Mhm.
and that is sort of true as well of the the trades. Most of those guys are coming from like mechanic
Yep.
type backgrounds, and that
Mhm.
in some ways doesn't really gel with the chemistry of lubricants, right? So
Yep.
everyone has a sort of mechanical focus, and when a bearing supplier comes and says, "I've changed the metallurgy of this bearing," everyone kind of gets that,
Mhm.
everyone understands it. The lubricant supplier comes and says, "We've altered the chemistry of the corrosion inhibitor," and it just
Yeah.
goes over everyone's head, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I,
Well
I
done.
do get it is
Yeah.
also a
Well done.
structural challenge as well to get people to
Yeah.
to understand, especially when oil it all looks the same. Right? So
Yeah.
it can be a little bit of a barrel that you got to push uphill.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll never forget. In my early days in lubrication, having a lubrication technician completely claim, and stand by that claim that you could look at the oils and tell which one was 460 and which one wasn't without even touching it. And I'm like, okay, I reckon I believed him for like a week, and then sort of did my homework. But maybe not.
yeah, well, interesting. Um, all right, this is an interesting one. So my plant doesn't really have any equipment that you can sample. So if
Okay.
so, what would you recommend to improve reliability? Now, I kind of I do empathize with this. So there, a lot of small scale manufacturing, or particularly in food industry as well.
Yep.
You get situations where there's just like a million electric motors throughout the plant. They're not, they don't have a big enough oil reservoir to really warrant sampling. So in
No.
that case, obviously you can rely on other condition monitoring techniques, but what's
Yeah.
your opinion on this?
Yeah. So the fact that they've used the word sample would suggest they're talking about oil sampling, probably not grease sampling. So, um, I'm gonna answer this question twice. Um, so yeah, I've done a lot of work with lubrication audits in the food industry,
Yeah, right.
and one of current customers, they've you can sort of see it. They've all got the same small, and I'll describe this brand, and I'm sure you'll know what it is. Small, grey, right angle gearbox, right? And they all look the same. They've all got them and they're all the same size, and there's always conveyor belts everywhere, and they hold, like, if you're lucky, 200 mils of oil. The strategy I propose, and it's more taking an asset management look at this actually, is, well, what's the risk profile of that bit of kit, if it does go down? And it's like, you've got to think of consequence, but you've got to think of likelihood. It's like, well, if we don't touch it, right, how long are we comfortable letting that oil sit there and slowly oxidize and slowly become junk, right? How long? And we sort of had that discussion. It's like, well, you start at like a month, and they go, no way, we can't change every gearbox like in a month. And you sort of bring that out and say, well, where are we sort of comfortable? And you could be a bit smarter and, try and work out the probability distribution. You could do all that if you want. We generally land at about 1 to 2 years, right, with those sorts of things. And then what we say is, well, you can still sample it as you drain it. Right. So what we say is you put like a drain sample fill strategy on it. And so that might be at 12 or 24 months. And then suddenly you're getting like condition data of the oil, which is cool. So people need to treat oil as an asset. That's something that I'll get on my soapbox now and say oil's an asset. It's no different to the electric motor or the pump. Oil's an asset. So we get, say, well, actually, that 12-month thing, we maybe could increase that, or we need to decrease that. So we can do that. So you can get some data that way. But then of course, you get some data on the wear debris coming through and from the asset as well. So you still can sample, and assuming this person has a lot of these boxes. And that's how you can improve reliability. I'm going to change this though and say, look, there's a lot of other things you can do to improve reliability in a plant such as this. And, if you go back into your RCM, reliability-centered maintenance theory and the like, 68% or thereabouts of failures are maintenance-induced. So to improve reliability, it's like, well, how can we make sure we've got clean lubricants? How can we make sure when we fill it that we're not contaminating it? How can we make sure we don't have leaks? These sorts of things that can be done to improve reliability in a plant such as that.
Yeah. Great answer. Great answer. I've got nothing to add there.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Next question.
Yeah.
When do you think we should apply predictive maintenance instead of preventative maintenance on an equipment or a system?
That's $1 million question, that one. There's no answer to this, to be straight up. It depends completely on your operational context. And, in a plant such as that food plant that only has, a few gearboxes and the like, maybe you're not doing predictive maintenance. But, on a rather large sugar refinery where I used to work, we did quite a lot of predictive maintenance. I would say the answer to this person's question would be is really understanding your company's or your organization's value chain, and what that means if that value chain is lost in certain areas, i.e. failure, and saying, well, how effective is a preventative maintenance? And for those who are not aware, preventative maintenance is, like the change thing out at set period, whether it's usage or calendar. Whereas predictive maintenance or condition monitoring type maintenance is sample the asset in some manner, whether it's vibration or fluid sampling and the like, and work out, well, are we at an acceptable level and how long until we're not at a level? You need to really take your organizational context into account here. No one can tell you what that what that is without fully understanding your context. So there's no answer to this one. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Totally agree. It's very contextual. The next question is
Yeah.
kind of a riff on that one, actually, which is what's the best
Yeah.
way to justify performing predictive maintenance on low value assets that would create huge losses when they fail? In some ways,
Huge
kind of
loss.
answered their own question, but yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Um, yeah, sure. I mean, it's obviously costs, is our home, but it's also risk as well. It comes back to that chief risk officer, right? Is how can we provide them assurance that, the next 12 months are going to be at this level of performance, and whether that's, availability of 99 point, the 5 nines, or less, by doing predictive maintenance or condition monitoring on those low value assets. They're not really low value because it sounds like they produce a lot of value for you.
yeah,
So it's the value is actually not just in its output, and the benefit of predictive maintenance. It's in the assurance that you provide your organization at any point in time. Say, what condition is my plant in? If you can answer that, that's great. You've done your job. If you can't answer that, you've got a long way to go.
yeah, yeah. All right. So this next question is about KPIs and reliability, and maybe reframe it a little
Yeah.
bit. So, basically, maybe my question to you is going to be, what are some of the best KPIs that you've seen in your experience
Mm.
for measuring the effectiveness of your reliability practices?
Yeah. For me, this one, it needs to take a step back and take a much more holistic approach. Um, the best KPIs I've seen, are quite simply the KPIs that measure your actual level of service, to the required level of service, and that's a very high statement there. But what I'm saying by that is, do you fully understand what you expect that system or asset to provide you? And that may be kilowatt hours, that may be tons out the door, but it will also be cost, and it will also be risk as well. And the performance is covered by the former. So looking at those three axes and saying, what is the risk profile that the asset or system should be providing? What is the performance, the output, and efficiency that goes along with that? And what is the cost associated with that? They're the real key KPIs, and everything else should sort of cascade from that. And that will be another context question for this person. Thinking that maybe the question is maybe slanted towards the effectiveness of a reliability engineering program. Perhaps that's how how it's phrased.
Maybe
For me,
also,
it comes back to the same thing, right?
yeah. I was going to say maybe also the other kind of angle that this question can come from as well is maybe
Mm,
how easy is it to link maintenance and reliability activities to the KPI outcome, right? So again, maybe
yeah.
getting back to, specifically to lubrication, which is what most of the audience here is kind of focused on. Often it's very difficult to show that some of the changes that you've made in lubrication have
Yep.
specific cost outcomes, right? Because they might happen
Yep.
so far down the track, or
Mm,
maybe as an example, like, some of the work that I used to do was around energy efficiency
mhm.
claims for specific lubricants. And there were so many variables that went into it that actually measuring a definite, you know, energy efficiency increase was very difficult to do, to sort of tease out the signal from the noise. So
Yeah.
maybe that's another angle to ask this question from is, you know, typically do you see a very clear link between maintenance and reliability activities and the outcome? Or is it kind of, we just have to trust that what we're doing is improving the bottom line?
Yeah. So there is a link, right? It's just we don't fully understand it. And to fully understand it, you need to, have enough data, which probably means years, and you're probably retired, and you're not in the thing anymore. So I appreciate where that is. I would say it's really it's really to say, well, this is where we were, and this is where we are. This is the change in whatever that was, um, and outlining, well, okay, that change, we expect it to mean this to the business, right? And you can make some assumptions, but just state your assumptions, right? And say, well, a reduction of, a reduction of oxidation in the oil level holistically. We expect that to give us an extra 2% of life, and that is this, right? You can't it would be very difficult to argue that less oxidation in the oil is a bad thing, right? That's pretty hard to argue. It's just like how much of a good thing it
Yep.
is, and sure, we could argue that all day and night, but low oxidation is a good thing.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
So here's one that I don't know who
Mm.
asked this, but I'm going to skip over to the next one, which is a little bit close to my heart, which is why do so many people forget about the cost of decommissioning an asset? Now, so this, I guess, is taking that holistic view of, what is the total cost of an asset over its lifetime, right? And decommissioning. So I was involved with a project which will remain nameless, where
Mm.
the decommissioning cost that was projected in the initial budget was in the tens of millions, and that was an order of magnitude wrong when I was asked to go
Right.
and do a first principles calculation.
As in it was less, like order of magnitude less than
No.
no. Yeah, okay.
It was it was a lot of money.
I was like,
Yeah. We can all be hopeful. So, I have firsthand experience of this, and I can imagine it is, in a lot of instances. Does it have to do with the fact that the teams that are often setting up the assets, like the projects team, for example, who are doing the scoping and design and all that kind of stuff? I mean, those guys are never really involved in decommissioning. So I guess it stands to reason that they wouldn't be able to accurately forecast decommissioning costs. What's your take on it? And maybe there's also a wider view of why isn't this typically captured in processes?
yeah. So the question says, like, they forget about the cost of decommissioning an asset. It's probably rooted a little bit, like you said, in the project space. It probably is wholly rooted in the project space. But like decommissioning an asset is essentially writing an asset off the balance sheet of an organization. And that if it's got residual value, costs the business on the balance sheet. And it's, we don't like to make our business less valuable. So there can be a little bit of that, like scared to or hesitant to do that. So it's like the dirty secret that we don't sort of mention until it comes. And I've been in situations where the decommissioning cost has actually come from onto the maintenance budget because there was no, So like, it's like, great, I've just paid to not maintain something. Thanks. So I can't say why people forget about it, but I think there are many reasons, and perhaps not fully engaging with the various stakeholders within the organisation about the project, and perhaps the project was done in more of a silo, discrete manner rather than making sure we're engaging. That, on the other hand, is a big part of asset management, decommissioning and understanding the life cycle, like you said, of the asset. And it really should be part of the asset management plan on that decommissioning and how that would be done and what that cost is, but also at a higher level in your asset management strategy and your strategic asset management plan. I would expect you have, I suppose, direction for how decommissioning should and the costs associated should be managed. You don't necessarily say how you don't necessarily say what you need to do. You just sort of say how you need to do it at that sort of level. So
Yeah.
it's a great question, but yeah, many answers.
Yeah, yeah. I can appreciate, like, as an example, in the oil business, what decommissioning looks like um, is kind of changing and evolving on a year-to-year basis too, right? So what the decommissioning looked like when the project first started might be radically different
Mm,
from what decommissioning looks like now. Like, you look at, let's say, for example, a lot of the old platform assets that are offshore.
yeah.
I mean, once upon a time, maybe decommissioning was, cutting it down to the stumps and plugging and abandoning all the
Mm,
wells.
mm,
Now we're looking at things like carbon capture and, trying to store carbon dioxide in those wells and aquifers and
yeah.
things like that. So, you know, maybe it's sort of not a cut and dry issue either. Um,
Yeah, repurpose. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Is remaining useful life useful? uh, that's the interesting question. So, do we typically have enough data that we can actually predict this value? So, maybe a little bit of context for this one, just from my own experience, is
Mm,
P to F intervals, right?
yeah.
You sort of hear them talked about all the time, but
Mm.
rarely do you actually see someone like put it down on paper. And even when you do, you sort of never validate that the assumption is true, because the whole point of putting a line in the sand and saying this is the P to F interval is that you will change it before the failure.
Yes.
So in some ways you never get that data validation. So I'd be curious about your thoughts on this
We could talk
one.
entire episode on this. This is my jam. To be straight up with your audience here. This is my absolute passion in reliability engineering. It's looking at degradation. That is something that I know quite a lot about. I'm doing a lot of work currently with my clients on degradation profiles, which is a fancy word for PDF interval. Um, so yeah, it is useful to answer that question. It's like useful to know, especially if you've got a large asset portfolio that's in your organization, to understand from a capital replacement perspective what the forecast looks like going forward many years, and say, okay, well, we need tens of hundreds of millions of dollars at these points. You start to accrue that right financially, and then when you finally come to say, hello, I'd like my $100 million, it's there ready for you. They don't have to go and take from Peter and Paul to give you that money. So yes, it's useful.
Yep.
Do we typically have enough data? You never have enough data. That's like the rule of thumb. It's like you just never sort of get there. It's more of a question of when do you have sufficient data to make a call on this. So there are reliability engine approaches and techniques that my company uses to predict. But we never predict the value. We predict the range that it's going to happen in, right? And we take a much more of a pragmatic approach and saying, look, we don't know. We don't know what the RUL is, but we think it's in this range here, right? And then so like there's uncertainty around that. And that's a good thing to say, I'm uncertain, but I'm at least 90% confidence it's within this bound here. So whether that bound is like 65 to 80 years or it's like 5 to 10 years, you can still make that call. And like you said, it's like, well, we're going to change it before then. Yeah, okay, but when? And it's like, well, yeah, at that point where we're 2 years out from that, lower confidence interval, that's when we're going to make the call, right? Because like the risk is quite high now. So yes, you can accurately predict the range in which it will occur. Good luck predicting the value that it actually occurs at. But like you said, you never actually change it at the value unless you're a run to failure. Then who cares? So yeah, look, if your audience wants more detail on that, hit me up on LinkedIn. It's something it's very close to my heart, that one.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that sounds like a great place to end it. So, Shane, thank you so much for taking the time to answer all these questions from the Ask Me Anything session. Really
Yeah.
appreciate your insight because you obviously bring a lot to the table in terms of that wider asset management discipline. So yeah, really appreciate you sharing your valuable knowledge, and I'll put a link to Shane's company in the description below if anyone wants to get in contact as well.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me, and thanks to your audience. I really enjoyed it.